Students, the lecture that I am going to deliver today is review of recent literature on sociology of media. As we are all aware, in the present times, all social processes and human interactions are being influenced by the media. Sociological considerations guided early inquiries in the field of media studies. However, as days went by, gradually communication bloomed as a separate academic discipline, and hence the distance grew with sociology. However, presently it's increasingly being felt that developments related to media need to be assessed more and more from a sociological perspective. Media Sociology, a reappraisal edited by Silvio Wishboard, is a significant volume in this direction. This book tries to reassess the importance of sociology in media studies, map out the present lines of communication and media, research embedded in sociological thought, and highlights the contribution of sociological thought to media studies. Now, students, as I have discussed earlier, there was a rift between sociology and communication media studies. And as I just told or discussed with you all, this book tries to bridge this rift. In the preface to the book, Silvio Wishboard makes a very interesting observation. Media sociology interrogates the relevance of the media to understand how society works, especially by linking the media to fundamental social processes such as stratification, organizations, identity, autonomy, individualism, community, social influence, and power. According to him, media sociology assumes that unpacking the complexity and multidimensionality of the media is critical to understanding fundamental aspects of societies, and that sociological theories offer critical questions and conceptual frameworks to analyze media processes and dynamics. So students, from here you can understand that the critical role played by media in understanding and in linking to the fundamental aspects of societies. And this cannot be done without revisiting the sociological theories and linking them to developments in the field of media and how media affects our day-to-day life. Now students, we will be going into a quick quiz time. What is the fundamental theme of the book, Media Sociology, a Reappraisal? I'll be giving you 4 options. The first option that we have is reassess the importance of sociology in media studies. The second option for you is help with communication models. Third, delink media from sociology, or if you think none of the above. Let me tell you the right answer. It's reassess the importance of sociology in media studies. I hope all of you have already got it right. Now, going into the details of the book encompasses contribution by media sociologists working on different research areas and is divided into 4 thematic sections. If you look at the first section that we are talking about, media, institution and politics, they are so closely interlinked. We'll be coming into further discussion about it shortly. Media industries and audiences. Now, this is also something that we need to be aware of, that how media industries and audiences get linked, or how they react to each other, or how media industries in one way or other influence the audiences. Third is always a very important area in the field of sociology, media and communication studies, that is media representations. How are different people represented in the media? How does media represent race, gender, and other areas? The last one talks about a very important area, that is technologies, self, and society. So whenever we talk about media, we talk about media technologies. And technology is ever changing, as we all know. But does it need to, in some way, link to self and the society? So that is a sociological consideration which takes it out of the realm of technology to link it to a wider sociological discussion. As I discussed just now, the book is divided into 4 parts, with each part comprising of 3 chapters. And as we know, this book is an edited volume, so there are contributions by different researchers in the field of sociology. In the first part, Rob Benson, in his chapter, reviews comparative studies to remind media sociologists how different institutions and institutional logic embedded in political culture and economics play a role in shaping media dynamics and content. When we look at the chapter by Michael Skudson, he links media sociology to political developments across democracies. Howard Tumber, in his chapter, tracks the sociology of news and journalism from the black and white era to the digital age. And students, as we can well understand that presently, as we are part of the digital age, understanding things in the present times and the present era has become absolutely necessary. Now students, we will be going into a quiz time. What does Rob Benson talk about in his chapter? Institutional logic embedded in politics, culture and economics play a role in shaping media content. The second option, media content needs to be treated separately from sociological considerations. Media sociology can not be used to define the different developments in media economics. Okay. The right answer that we have is institutional logic embedded in politics, culture, and economics play a role in shaping media content. I'm sure all of you have got the right option when I gave you this quiz. Now let's concentrate on the second part of the book. This talks about media industries and audiences, as I discussed earlier. Here we find a chapter by Richard Busk, who explains structure and agency as central theme to his discussion of audience studies. So as we can understand from here, students, that structure and agency has assumed a lot of importance in his chapter. And later on, we'll understand as you go through the book that why structure and agency has become a central theme of this book. Timothy Havens, in her chapter, explores media industry sociology from mainstream cultural and critical perspectives. As you can well understand that in the present times, an understanding of mainstream critical and cultural perspectives have become absolutely necessary. When we look at the work by Toby Miller, it helps us to understand the state of the political economy of media operations. You can understand, students, this is a very vital area, the state of the political economy of media operations. At the present times, when we see that media operations are transnational, going across boundaries, political economy will definitely assume a lot of importance. Here he links them to recent developments in media ownership, control, and political struggle. When we look at different books in media studies, they talk a lot about media ownership, the changing role of media ownership, how media ownership is affecting the content. And to understand the things from a sociological perspective, this chapter will definitely help you to get an in-depth insight into this whole process. It also talks about control and political struggle. Who controls the media? Because of that control, how can media affect the way we perceive things? And how this whole process can be linked to political struggle. So as I have been talking from the very beginning, when we started with this lecture, this review of recent literature, where sociology of media is concerned, I have been saying that all the developments in the field of media is somewhere linked to sociology or sociological developments. And chapter across chapter in this book will help you understand how everything that is happening in the media organization and every processes with which the media is coming in contact is sociologically interlinked. The third section of the book talks about media representations. Students, I think you are aware that when we see different academic work in the field of media studies, media representations have been dealt by a number of scholars. How does media represent people? How does media represent gender? How does media represent race? Here in this particular book, an in-depth study into this area has been undertaken by 3 researchers. Shani Orgad addresses media organizations from different sociological perspectives. When we look at the work by Laura Grinstaff and Andrea P. Press, both of them together writing that particular chapter, they delve into sociological considerations to feminist media studies. Now, this is one area, students, which is, as we all know, growing in the field of media studies and in the field of sociology. And when both of them come together, feminist media studies assume a lot more importance. Ronald R. Jacob, in his chapter, discusses media representation of races. Now, how media represent races, how media represent people, as I have just talked about, that it's about gender, it's about races, it's about people. And he goes into a very in-depth understanding and talks in the chapter about this media representation. How does media represent races? And from that, how do we perceive about different races, people across the world? In the final part of the book, that is the fourth part that we have, because we know that this book has been divided into 4 sections. This final part of the book, there are 3 chapters again, which provide us with an insight into a range of sociological questions affecting the contemporary study of technology. Now, any talk about media sociology, about media organizations, is incomplete without a detailed talk about technology, because it is the technology which is driving the media process forward. Graham Kirkpatrick, in his chapter, throws light on the impact of social changes in late capitalism on technological design, its purpose and aesthetics. The chapter by Rich Ling focuses on the social consequences of mobile communication. Students, when all of you use smartphones, mobile communication has assumed a lot of importance in the present world of media studies. Because what you communicate, how you communicate, this needs to be analyzed from various sociological perspectives. It cannot be a mobile communication being dealt in isolation. We know that mobile communication in one way or other, is affecting different social processes. We talk about how we interact with people over social media using the mobile phone. What are the various apps which are there on mobile phone, and what are the sociological impacts of using such kind of apps? These are questions which are there in our mind, and this needs to be studied. And this is where Rich Link's chapter assumes so much of importance. Jeff Pulley, in his chapter, tries to understand digital social networks from a sociological perspective. So, in one way or other, it is somewhere linked to Rich Link's chapter, but explores further areas. When we talk about digital social structures, or digital social networks, rather, they are presently a very important area of study from sociological perspective. When we talk about different impact of social media on children, on women, men, on youth, that cannot be just discussed from a media technology perspective. It has to be somewhere rooted to sociological considerations. This chapter urges us to explore further possibilities of studying social media developments. That means, what are the other areas that can be studied when social media is booming, leading us to different thought processes and opening possibilities of different influences as we see. And these social media developments can be studied from the aspects of community, self, and social experience. Now, another book which all of you will find useful is Media Sociology by David Barat. Now, in this book, Barat gives a clear account of how and why sociologists have studied the media, why it is so important to study the media for all of you from a sociological perspective, looking in particular at the arguments about the effects of television, video, comics, newspaper, and radio on their audiences. These are all things which are around you. You see the television, you watch video, many of you are interested in comics. It's rather important that you read a newspaper every day and listen to radio. And when you do that, when you engage with all these mediums, there is definitely some kind of effect on you. Now, he further guides us in understanding how media organizations function, how news is manufactured, and what are the political and commercial constraints in the process. So whenever we look at news, we only look at news. But we hardly understand what are the political and commercial constraints which are there in the process. So this book will definitely give you an insight into the political and commercial constraints which are coming in the way when you manufacture news. He also discusses the impact of media technologies and methods of studying the media, which include some very important areas which are there, like uses and gratifications, content analysis, semiology, and structural approaches. So when you read a research book on media studies, you will find uses and gratification research traditions. You will find that they have described about content analysis. Some of them also talk about semiology and structural approaches. But to link them to sociological considerations is what makes this book very different from the rest. This gives us an in-depth analysis of things from media as well as sociological perspectives. And as we started the discussion, we talked about how media and sociology can be linked together to move ahead in the coming days. Now, as we were doing, we will be again going into a quiz time. The second part of the book mainly talks about your options: media representations, media audience and industries, or technology, self and society, or none of the above. So there are 4 options that you have. And the right option for you is media, industries and audiences. I'm sure, as it has been the case with the earlier quizzes, you have got this option absolutely correct. Summary of review of literature on sociology of media 1. Now students, as you can gather from the lecture, that this particular book, Media Sociology, a Reappraisal, which is edited by Silvio Wishboard, is a very important resource for your further work in the field of media sociology, your further findings. Since it is an edited book, it gives you a wider idea about various social processes. Since there is talk on media institutions, industries and audiences, representations, technological part, so you can well understand that a number of areas about which you might be having questions regarding media have been addressed in this book through a number of chapters being contributed by noted researchers. Now, when we look into this particular book by David Barrett called Media Sociology, here again, which I have already discussed, there is a very clear-cut idea about why, as sociologists, you should study media and why media sociology is so important from the perspective of media studies also. As we started the discussion with this particular idea that media and sociology cannot be delinked, they have to go together. They have to go hand in hand. And that's why in the present times there is this increasing need being felt that media should be understood more and more from the sociological perspective. This particular book, as I have already told or discussed earlier, it helps us in understanding how media organizations function, so important for your studies, for your understanding of media. And to cap it all, the most important part, how news is manufactured and what are the political and commercial constraints in the process. So now, students, you can understand that all these external factors have a bearing on media. And to understand media and its impact, its role, its business, its economics, these are the areas which you must need to understand. And this is where this particular book comes handy. This particular book also talks about media technologies and guides you in studying the media. And in the process, as I have already told you earlier in this lecture, that it includes the various approaches which are there, which are very integral to media studies, understandings, uses and gratification, content analysis, semiology and structural approaches. You will see this across various research books which are there on mass media. But here he links them so well with sociological findings. So that's why for a study on media sociology, this book is so indispensable. I hope that from this particular lecture, you all have understood the books to search for, the books to relate to for your further findings in the field of media sociology.